Okay, good morning everybody. Hope you're all well. Thank you very much for joining us again for one of our monthly webinars. I'm going to make no excuses and apologies this morning for sitting here slightly bleary-eyed and with a cup of takeaway coffee from the local shop. Yesterday was my daughter's 8th birthday, so absolutely exhausted from running around with kids all of yesterday. So fasten your seatbelts, this could be quite an interesting webinar. I say thank you for joining us. Today we're going to take you through what we've learned, what we've understood about October's Prime Day or Prime Day Big Deals. I think people keep calling it different things, but officially it wasn't a Prime Day, but it was Prime Day Big Deals. And as always, we'll take you through the market data that we found, the insights that we found, and this time we'll take you through some quite interesting category data on 3 of Amazon's largest categories. Before I begin, for those that are new to our webinars, I'm Andy. I'm the CEO of VentureForge, and we're a full-service Amazon agency working with brands across Amazon Seller, Amazon Vendor, to grow their business across the UK, Europe, and North America. We're an Amazon partner on Amazon Ads. We're a verified partner. We're also an Amazon SPM partner. And fresh off the press, I'll jump forward a little bit. We're also, as of Monday, the winner of Amazon's Challenger Awards Challenger category for the Amazon Ads Partner Awards, which were announced in New York on Monday evening. Something that we are exceptionally proud of. I think it's the first time I've spoken publicly about it, and just to repeat some of what I've shared on social, exceptionally proud of the team that have helped us achieve this. We set out a couple of years ago to build a great agency. We had a clear vision last year that we wanted to win one of these awards, and absolute credit to our advertising team and our account directors and our partner managers at Amazon that have helped make this happen for us. And I'll jump back. I told you this could be quite an interesting morning. Just to explain a bit more about who we are and who we work with. We deliberately work across a really broad spectrum of brands, and some of those are on the screen that you can see there. We work across health and beauty, food, consumer electronics, toys, clothing, kitchen equipment. We generally work across every category, but what we specialize in is growing brands on Amazon, regardless of the category. Now that the intros are out of the way, let's get into what I think you're all here for, or hope you're all here for, because if that's not the case, you're on the wrong webinar. But today I want to take you through some of the data that we've got on Amazon's Prime Day Big Deals, which ran on the 10th to the 11th of October this year. Usually I'd sit here and talk about the high-level macro data that we found, but quite interestingly, I'm not sure what to read into this. This is the first year where Amazon haven't released that much macro-level detail. The only data they've released is the statement that you see in green there, that it was their largest ever 2-day October holiday kickoff event. Read into that what you will, because that feels quite a niche statement and a niche way of phrasing that. And ultimately, I think it's comparing against Prime Early Access sale last year. And the only other stat they've released is that US Prime members purchased more than 25 million items. Every other bit of data and insight that we've got within our peer network, our peer agencies, other analysts that we speak to, is varied, and it's suggesting that growth across the board was north of 13% when you compare that to the Prime Early Access sale from 2022. But again, that data point is varying wildly across the different sources that we've got access to and the different analysts that we speak to. And I said at the beginning, I'm not quite sure what to read into this. Is it bigger than Amazon expected? Do they want to keep some of that close to the chest? But if so, why would they not be celebrating that? Was it not quite the success that they were hoping for, and are they shying away from that? I've personally not got that much of an opinion on it. I think it's really up to you how you interpret that, but quite telling that Amazon hasn't gone big with volume numbers, sales numbers, revenue numbers this time around. Whether that's to manage expectations or not, I'm not too sure. What they have shared is some of their best-selling items. So the 9 items that you see on the screen were the items that featured heavily across Europe, North America, and USA for Amazon's Prime Big Deal days. Typically, AirPods, consumer electronics featured relatively high. You've got top center left a rug and carpet cleaner. Perhaps not something you'd expect to do well, but consumer electronics does feature particularly well over Prime deals. But then teeth whitening strips, perhaps not something you normally expect, but toys coming through quite loud and clear with consumers buying that in the build up to peak, and perhaps banking those early pre-Christmas savings on those categories where they know they're going to spend cash in the next 2 or 3 months anyway. Again, a very, very typical assortment of very broad assortment of products, but not quite as heavy on some of the consumer electronics stuff that I would have expected to see given what we've seen at previous events. I'm now going to go into some data, and as we start to talk about data, what I think is important is that we reference where this data has come from. So on every slide where I'm sharing data, you'll see in the bottom left, we're sharing where we've got that from. And in this instance, this is what we call our aggregated client data. So what we do at every Prime event, whether it's kind of Prime Day, whether we're talking about Black Friday even, we look across the entire VentureForge client set. We take a like-for-like set of clients that we were working with last year or last event and this year, and we pull a piece of data together. So here we're looking at the 16 days from the 1st of October up to and following the Prime event. The green line is the sales that we generated for those clients this year. Clearly, I've kind of cancelled out what those exact numbers are, but then we've got the same client set for comparison in the previous year and in the previous event. I've labelled on here where Prime Big Deal Days landed and where last year's equivalent event, P's Prime Early Access Sale landed. And what you can clearly see in there is that from our data set, we've seen a significant uplift year on year and significantly greater performance. We're talking here 98% in cash terms that was generated for our clients across that period. Now, I appreciate here I'm talking about our clients, and this isn't a sales pitch from us to, hey, we grew ours 98%, with market data saying 13. What I would say here is we do this deliberately. It's an aggregated data set. And for those that have joined our previous webinars where we had two of our team, also we had one of our team and a guest from a client talking, we don't have clients that all our clients don't do prime deals. We actually recommend to a number of our clients, it's better for you to not trade this event. It's better for you to maximize the opportunity, but don't discount. So this is a real mixture of clients that have done Prime Day in the literal sense of they've discounted heavily, they've tried to clear through lines. And equally at the same time, brands that have not participated with discount, brands that have wanted to ride this out at full price, some brands that may have even put some price increases through. So this is intended to be probably the only way we can say what's happened in a broad set of revenue. And to give you an idea of the size of this is now somewhere in the region of £45 million worth of annual sales that we represent across our entire client base. It's a good aggregate data set across many categories. What we've also done is just gone over a slightly broader period here and looked at what's happening on a daily level. And sorry, that previous chart was on a weekly level. This is now on a daily level, working out till the 21st of October. What other trends have we seen? I think two things really, well, probably three things stood out for me on this. One is the size of that peak and that revenue growth year on year, event versus event. But what we also see here is kind of a lesser dip pre-event. What we expect to see, what Amazon may not necessarily talk about, but is where happens, is a dip post-event. People are waiting for deals. People are waiting for value to come. And consumers know that. At the moment Amazon go on TV, advertising the Prime deal coming, sales typically drop off. And what we saw this year, just before that Prime Day peak, was there was a demand dip, but it wasn't quite as significant as we would have expected. You can see maybe trailing your sales dipping 3rd, 5th of October. There's certainly a dip in the 7th, but it doesn't crash. You don't see a notable dip off. Then you get the huge peak of the 2-day event. And what we then normally expect afterwards is value is gone, the consumer's not as excited, and the line you can see from last year dips back to below an average data point. What we've actually seen this year is post-event growth and people actually buying back into deals. Theories as to why this might have happened, many things, but I think one of them might be Amazon brands getting better at maximizing post-event value and using advertising in a better way to bring consumers back into the brand and get them to buy more. But regardless of the reason behind it, it's quite a notable shift this year that there hasn't really been that dip to below the average baseline prior to the Prime event. We've also seen what we call kind of peakier peaks. And if you look at the hourly breakdown of the 2-day event, and for clarity, this is the 2 days of this year's event versus the 2 days of last year's event. So it's not a calendar day comparison. It's day 1 of this year's event versus day 1 of last year's, day 2 of this year's versus day 2 of last year's on an hourly basis. And what you normally see there, and it's masked a little bit because of the scale of the charts, is you always get an early kick in the morning. People coming on day 1 for value. They come in at the end of day 1 when they get home from work and try to get value. And the shape of day 2 is typically, you don't get that peak in the morning, you get the peak at the end of the day when people want that last grab at getting value. But what we've seen here is the hourly peaks kicked off a lot quicker. and have actually been much peakier, if that's even a phrase. So you can see those kind of 3 data points, potentially a 4th data point sitting around after the first peak of day 1. The peaks are getting peakier, and people seem to be piling in at those critical points to either get the first grab of value or the last grab of value in their working day or the last grab of value at the end of the event. So we've seen people become much more focused into these peaks and buying and trying to get value when it's there. What can you take from that? I think for me, it's starting to give, I suppose, much more focus on how you manage your advertising budgets, how you manage your trading throughout the day within these events. It's no longer about how do I maximize the 2-day event. It's how do I trade within the hours? Where do I place my advertising budget? Where do I place my bets? How do I, as a brand, need to be acting through the day to maximize this event and get the maximum value possible from it, given how the consumer is now starting to shop? As I said, the year-on-year trend is still there. Value is being looked for early in the day on day 1, back end of the day on day 1, less so at the beginning of day 2, definitely there at the back end of day 2 when people try to finish their shopping at the back end of that event. A bit of a new introduction from us here, and we can't claim the credit for this. This is a fantastic source of analysis from a company called Numerator, and they run consumer shopping panels. So everything I've shared with you so far is actual sales data. This is consumer sentiment. These guys are speaking to consumers. I believe this was a survey of 5,000 consumers throughout the Prime Day event, understanding how did they shop and why did they shop and how did they behave. Couple of really telling stats from me here. That first one, top left, 82% of consumers had an idea what they wanted to purchase going into Prime Day. And that for me really supports a lot of the messaging we've been giving and our advertising teams have been working on into advertising and building brand awareness before the event even starts. How do you get a consumer aware of your product? Particularly if you fall into, I suppose, more higher consideration categories where a consumer is not going to rock up at an event and drop £400 on a TV, £100 on a beauty device. How can you build that awareness in the consumer that your product is there pre-event, knowing that 82% of consumers go into those Prime Day events knowing what they intend to purchase? The other really telling stat for me is not necessarily on that screen, but is a kind of combination of the top right stat, 42% shop for items included in general Prime Day deals, and the bottom left stat, 34% purchase items included in Prime Day lightning deals. If you stick those two numbers together, that leaves you about 25% of consumers buying things that haven't come from deals. And that for me is also really telling and supportive of some of the strategies we work with our clients on, that Prime events aren't necessarily about discounting, because there's a huge influx of volume into Amazon. There's a huge buildup of consumer intent to purchase. You don't have to discount to succeed on Prime Day. I'm also conscious we kind of bang that drum a lot at VentureForge. It's not to say that's the right thing to do, but what it is to say is there's a question to be asked. What is the role of Prime Day in your business? How do you plan strategically for it to maximize the value for your business, not just to do discounting because that's what people are led to believe you should do over a Prime Day event? Also from Numerator, quite telling, quite an aggregated data pool here. Looking at the average order size, you've got lots of people on that left-hand side of the scale. Again, this has been put into dollars to aggregate the UK, US, and American sales data into one common currency. But lots of people buying quite heavily on small, low consideration, dare I say, in-the-moment purchasing. But equally, a lot of value going through. 17% of customers bought $100 plus, $100 to $200 plus items. So maybe, I don't know, about 80 to 170 pounds order value. People are spending good money on Amazon over these events, but perhaps they're doing that research up front and expecting or waiting for a deal to land. Also, what's quite interesting across the other two stats, the right-hand side, is the average number of orders per household and the average household spend. So although people are placing, probably the vast majority of people placing lower average order value orders, across their multiple orders in their household, the vast majority is spending $100, 20% spending $200, 18% spending north of $200. So lump those stats together, 60% of people are spending over $100 in their Prime Day shopping on Amazon. Quite a big shift from the usual stats you see of what people spend on Amazon over a typical trading period. So now we've looked at that at a high level, I'm going to take 2 seconds to get the next hit of caffeine in. I'll take you now through some of the major categories that we've pulled some quite interesting data from on Amazon UK. So starting with toys and games, the reason we put toys and games first is, one, building into peak, toys and games is a huge category on Amazon. You normally start to see this as the early stage signs of how will the golden quarter look on Amazon. Secondly, it's one of Amazon's largest categories. So for us to look at a category like this, see who's been doing what and how they've been succeeding over Prime Day, it gives us a really nice broad data set and quite an interesting data set to work with. This data is now all coming from our market share tracking, and we can pull this pretty much for any category and any brand on Amazon and start to understand over a time period, how is that category, how have those brands traded at a volume level, a value level, what kind of levers have they pulled, such as average, so what is the average price, and have the brands pulled a price lever to generate that success? So quite a relevant and interesting way of looking at what's happened over a Prime Day event. So here, looking at toys and games, quite interestingly, 30% growth week on week. We've taken this analysis over a 4-week period. The last week here is the week that contained the Prime Day event. And we saw in this market 30% week on week growth. What you can see to the left-hand side in the first 3 weeks on that bluey purple line, that's the market share, market shape at this time of year, starting to really ramp in September, October. This almost goes hockey stick kind of shape into the last 2 to 3 weeks of December as people are buying Christmas gifts. But what we've seen here is that really big kick on that 30%, that first real incline driven by the Prime event. Also, what's quite interesting here is across that average price data point, that orange line that we've highlighted there, we've only seen a 9p decrease in prices from the data point on the left up to Prime Day event on the right-hand side. Now, I've got to be cautious here. This is very high-level aggregated data. This is every brand selling these products. It's 8.7 million units that have been sold. So below there will be brands that have discounted quite heavily. There will be some that have done nothing. But quite telling here, in a category that is huge for Christmas, the general direction is not heavily discount-driven, but that has supported a 30% growth in sales volume and value because of the Prime event. Going below the surface of this a little bit, let's start to look now at who was in that mix, who has succeeded. Lego are by far the largest toy brands on Amazon, and over this 4-week period, they drove £11 million worth of sales. Second place there, you have Barbie. Again, we do this at a brand level. That could be Barbie toys in an educational level. It could be Barbie soft toys, but the Barbie brand overall, regardless of the subcategory, 2.7 million of sales, then dropping down to 1.7 with Pokemon. And DJI, although they're a consumer electronics company, they sit the vast majority of their lines, drones, etc., into the toys category. So they came out at 4th place in this category. However, clear winner there is Lego. Huge uptake for them, way in excess of the market average of 30%. Their sales growth over the Prime Day event was absolutely phenomenal. And you can just see how that was really drowned out the 3 lines below there from Barbie, Pokemon, and DJI, who have all had success. And if you took the Lego line off there, you'd see great growth in those lines. But the level of growth from Lego there has kind of drowned that out. When we look at how did that happen, now unfortunately I realised as I put this presentation that the colours have swapped on this second chart. So for the Lego line, you're now looking at the tealy green line, and that's the second one down. They really didn't change price for Lego, but what DJI did, they clearly, across that chart, built price into week 3 and then dropped price into the Prime event. So dare I say, a traditional retail price establishment, put the price up, get that artificially high potentially price point, and discount against that into that Prime Day. So in reality, DJI probably aren't discounting here below their average price, but they are playing a high-low pricing strategy, which is very common across all retail channels. Delving down to beauty, again, one of Amazon's largest categories, exceptionally competitive. And one of the reasons we pulled this category out was in a competitive category, whereas toys is competitive, but it's going to its natural peak. Beauty is an uber competitive category on Amazon where price is exceptionally important, depending on the type of brand that you've got, and brand is exceptionally important. So we thought this would be an interesting category to look at from a size point of view, but also from a competitive nature point of view. In this category, again, less of a price battle here, which is not what we expected to see. But as I said, with the toys category, the devil's in the detail here. This is across the whole category. There was on average a 2p decrease in price point. The category itself saw 18% growth, but some of that growth had already been coming into the winter months as people perhaps look after their skin a little bit more. It had been coming through that period, but the real growth came over the Prime weekend with 18% growth being seen in the category. This, however, became so much more interesting when you delved into who was succeeding, which are the 4 large brands that we want to have a look at, and what really happened in here. For a second, let's just isolate that L'Oreal line, ignore that kind of greeny teal line, and just focus in on the lines for CeraVe, Maybelline, and Garnier. What's really clear there is from a brand market share point of view, some real battling going on there. You see the Garnier line that actually peaked before Prime Day. It built really well into Prime Day, but peaked before it, then dropped off over Prime Day. Whilst Maybelline and CeraVe having a real clear go at growing their share and growing volume and value over that Prime Day event. L'Oreal, on the other hand, and I'm always conscious that we don't sense check every single attendee that's come to these webinars, so I might be careful in case we've got anybody from L'Oreal that listens to this now or afterwards, but a real fall off a cliff into that Prime Day event that, dare I say, it started at the beginning of the month. The question is, what's driving that? Is that a stock challenge? Is that a terms challenge with Amazon? Is that a genuine market share and demand challenge and a lack of Amazon strategy for that brand? Is it a key couple of lines going out of stock? We can get to that, but we've not done it for the purpose of this webinar. But what was really clear then going into the Prime event, something else changed there. You know, that level of drop off from a market value point of view absolutely fell off a cliff. So something fundamentally was not right in L'Oreal's strategy building into that Prime Day event, and that there'd be big questions there for me to ask. When you then look at what's happened here, from a price point of view of these brands, fundamentally, you've got stable pricing here. Where it's actually its most stable is with CeraVe, and bear in mind this is a brand that had the market share dominance and actually benefited most from the Prime Day event. They've not done that through discounting. When you get to this level and look at price point changes, you're looking at individual brands. So this data is much more useful and transparent. So here we're seeing, yes, there is a price change in CeraVe, but they've not driven a 25% off discount to make Prime Day work for them. This has been more about, I suspect, their advertising strategy, their market share strategy, their demand generation strategy on Amazon, rather than just pulling a price lever. If you then look down the levels here, L'Oreal, nothing really going on. Garnier, potentially a price increase going into that final week of the 4-week period, which was the Prime event. And Maybelline, again, trading relatively flat on price, potentially a slight price increase going into that final week as well. So although there is a huge amount of share fights going on here, it feels like it's being done from a demand generation point of view, potentially an advertising point of view, less so from a price war point of view to grab that market share and succeed over Prime Day. And then the final category we've decided to look at is home and kitchen. Again, the reason here is this is a super broad category, but we know from looking at it for some clients recently, it's also dominated by some big brands and some very intelligent brands. And when some of those names come out in the charts, you'll probably see who I'm referring to, but brands that have been on Amazon for quite some time and make a huge success of Amazon. So we're very interested to see when we start to peel back the data here, what have those brands done and how have they traded in a very broad and quite interesting category with some mature competition. So again, across this category, absolutely huge over this 4-week period, £485 million worth of sales generated across just short of 24 million units. 24 million units. Week-on-week growth into that Prime Day event was 10%, and that was driven by just a 14p decrease across the board. Again, the devil's in the detail below that price point when you look at the individual brands. What you're not seeing here is the category growth into this particular trading period, into the particular golden quarter. Toys, health and beauty you can understand, but home and kitchen isn't a category that people naturally think hey, I'm going to buy a lot of that stuff for Christmas gifting. So this is one where you are seeing that slightly lower week-on-week growth. This is now at 10% rather than the 30% level that we saw in beauty. But again, it's not a category that's seen that huge upswing and build into that peak trading period. So we wouldn't expect quite a big uptake from purchases being brought forward or consumers trying to get discount or value on spend that they know would lay down in the next 2 to 3 months anyway. We'll then go behind the scenes and look at the top 4 brands in that category. And this is where you see the 2 brands that really stand out. We've got Ninja taking 7.4-ish million of that sales volume. Shark, their sister brand, taking 4 million. And then in the middle there, you've got Russell Hobbs at 5.7, Silent Night Embedding at 4.2. As I said at the beginning, this is such a broad category, and we've done this deliberately because we could delve down here into small domestic appliances, we could have delved down into furniture, we could have gone into bedding, for example. But this allowed us to look at a very general broad category that doesn't necessarily build into the peak period and see how have evergreen brands with full annual wide kind of sales volumes, how they're tradable at this period. And what we've seen is pretty much across the board, everybody started to see growth here. What is really interesting, if you look at the level of kick up that Ninja have seen, that didn't kick in just into the Prime Day event. They started to build that from the second week in this period, September the 30th. That then built again really well the 3rd week, and it built really well in that Prime Day event. So kind of medals all around and round of applause to those guys. Skip over Russell Hobbs and Silent Night for a second and go down to Shark, their sister brand. The shape of that line is almost exactly the same in that pink line at the bottom. Builds steadily across the training period. Maybe it wasn't quite as strong in that first week, but builds very, very well across the 4-week trading period with a phenomenal level of value growth into that final week. Clearly there, a group of companies, 2 sister brands that know exactly how to trade that platform, but also across all the brands here, Russell Hobbs and Silent Night, driving really good growth across that period. Let's have a look at how they did it. I think really telling here, for everybody, it was driven by price. There were price discounts across the category for everybody here. But Shark in particular, you can see the huge drop off in that price point. Equally in the first 3 weeks, you can see a build up in that price point and how they have potentially traded that price up to allow for a heavier discount, heavier perceived discount for the consumer into that trading event. As I said, when we talked about one of the earlier categories, that's traditional high-low price establishment type of pricing that is clearly working very, very well for the brands that are operating in this category. I think as well, that level of discounting supports how this category generally doesn't build into peak. I can't see many people sitting there thinking, I'm buying a vacuum cleaner or a food blender as a Christmas present. I can certainly see how that lands in a toys category. So where brands are in a category that doesn't naturally see that uptake, perhaps that price lever for these brands is a much bigger one to play at a particularly competitive time of year where they've got an opportunity to trade well, but have to use discount as that mechanism. So hopefully what you've seen there across those 3 categories is 3 categories that behave, well, first of all, a huge categories. We've deliberately gone very broad and wide to give us really big sales volumes and values to allow us to delve into some brands and understand how does each category trade with different trading dynamics, some very mature brands with good sales levels, but clearly quite different views on the role of price, the role of promotion, the role of advertising and demand generation to drive their Prime Day success. The bit we've not got the answer to is why did they do what they do, but I think that for me is the crux of any Prime Day conversation for me. You've got to start with what does your brand want? What is your brand trying to achieve as part of its wider channel strategy through Amazon? Before you then start to work out how do you get success from that Prime Day event. And for those that have been on our webinars before, it's probably no surprise that I'm kind of banging that drum again. Start with the what and the why. What do you want to achieve and why should you do things on Amazon? And then you can start to understand, well, how do the brands in your category behave? What opportunity does that create for you? And then you can start to lay down your own Amazon Prime Day strategy, whether that's a Prime Day big deals event or P's as it was last year, a true Prime event, or even Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Cyber Week type events. Always start with what are you trying to achieve as a brand. The final point for me is to really kind of thank everybody who's joined us on the webinar today. I said today is one of our data sharing webinars. we're going back to our usual format in the next 4 weeks of bringing the conversation back and bringing some experts around the table, and we'll get that next webinar out, promoted, and invite you all to it in the next week or so. But what I want to offer out today is we've clearly been through 3 categories here at a very, very broad level to help you see how different people have traded Amazon. But what we'd like to offer to anybody on the webinar today is the opportunity to do that for your category. I'm very conscious that this is now us saying, can we help you? But this is a genuine offer. We'd love to sit down with you for half an hour to an hour, open up our tools and our data and delve into your specific category or categories and help you understand what happened in your category, what did your competitors do, and what can you learn from that. And we'll send you all that data and all the charts to follow up to that conversation. So if anybody is interested in spending half an hour, 45 minutes with me or one of the team, please just tick the yes box on the poll that Whitney has kindly shared on the screen with you now, and one of us will follow up by the end of today to get some time booked in. That's no obligation. It's just an offer from us. We can't cover every category on these webinars, but we would love to help you understand what has happened in your individual category. So I'll say tick the box if you want us to reach out. Equally tick the no box, and that poll will disappear on your screen. And the final point for me is, again, just to thank you to all for joining us. Really appreciate you giving us 30 minutes of your time. Hopefully you found today useful. Thank you for putting up with my caffeinated blurting at you this morning. And we look forward to seeing you on our next webinars. Hope you enjoy the rest of the day and have a great weekend. Thank you.